joining us to share some findings from a new study, again funded and supported by the Perspective Fund, that CMSI is releasing this week titled Beyond the Impact Report: What's Really Needed to Produce and Sustain Social Impact in Documentary Film. Please join me in welcoming David Conrad.
Thank you so much, Gabe, and thank you, Danae, too. And we feel so lucky to be able to work with you and Andrew and the whole Perspective Fund team, so thank you. And good morning, everyone. As Gabe said, I'm David. I'm joining as a researcher from CMSI, focused in journalism and documentary. And I've long been a student of this conference and this event, and organizer and a mover of chairs and things. And so I'm feeling very, very lucky to be able to speak here today, and a little freaking out a little bit, but it's okay. So thank you for the opportunity. And we're very excited to be releasing this study today, and we hope that it's going to be useful in some way to everything that people are doing on this panel, certainly, and hopefully everybody in this room in some way. And so if you have any questions afterwards, please reach out to Katie, who is our leader in organizing all of this work, or Danae, or myself, and we'd love to connect with anyone interested to try and find ways to use this work to leverage the work that you do. We feel like there's a lot of good stuff in this and good data in this study, and we want to put it to good use. So thank you so much for that. So to start with some quick context, so I've been lucky enough to spend the last few years working with Katie and Varsha and the whole CMSI team on a series of projects that work to bring better data to understanding and really proving the role that documentary can play in social impact and social justice outcomes. And much of our research in this area has proceeded from a simple but important starting point, which is that new and persistent inequities within the industry, especially around issues of censorship, diversity, and commercial control. And at the same time, the popularity of the big, entertainment-style documentaries is also causing some more important examples of documentaries that are actually achieving social impact to go largely overlooked. And so over the last few years at CMSI, we've released a series of studies which have sought to explore what we call the power in documentary. So that is the decisions that shape what we see on screen, who is creating the films that get seen the most, including who and what they're focusing on, and what are the infrastructures that enable films to be made and to find value. So in this area, we have published work that focuses on who is telling whose stories, which looked at the race and gender identity of the filmmakers and main protagonists behind more than 1,200 different documentaries, which was all that were available to stream by the major distributors at the time of that study. We've also looked at impact contracts that filmmakers are receiving from major distributors after their films are acquired. Film always in season. And we have another study also supported by the Perspective Fund, focused on the film The First Step, which is by Brandon Kramer, who is going to be here this afternoon. He's on the next panel, I believe. And so we're excited about that, and we'll be releasing that in the fall. And then for the study that we're releasing today, which is probably the biggest that we've done since I've been at CMSI, we wanted to take a big picture view of what it means to work at the intersection of documentary and social impact today, including better understanding where filmmakers are looking for good work, what challenges they're facing, and what realities they feel are not being talked about enough. And so to simplify what was really a couple years of collaborative conversation and design with Danae and the Perspective Fund team, we started by convening an advisory group of leaders in the space of film and social impact, who each brought years of experience working across several different countries and several different areas with film. And from this group, we gathered the types of questions that they felt were not receiving enough attention. And we also built a list of films that they felt offered insight into both the highs and the lows of this work. And then over a period of about 6 months, we includes my colleague Aras, who is, well, he's teaching right now, but he'll be here this afternoon too. We conducted in-depth interviews with more than 70 different filmmakers and impact producers who led social impact efforts around 50 different documentaries across more than 15 countries. And we spoke to most of these people multiple times, so this research is really based on around 100 interviews. And the full list of films that we looked at are shared in the full report, but it included both, the big budget films that everybody might know about, and also the films that were solely funded by the pockets of the filmmaker themselves or by smaller organizations. And so, okay, so what did we find? So the report goes around about 11 big findings. But with the time I have, I'm going to highlight just the 5 that the participants said are most urgent to address. The first being that we found widespread concern that over the increasingly restrictive practices of commercial distributors. So while the report features many examples of docs that are being used in recent movement building work and social justice work, several participants said that it's getting harder to find distribution, much less to do impact work around films that may be politically controversial. And this problem is being worsened by 2 other trends. First, what is political is being treated with an increasingly films for certain periods of time, if at all. They're giving explicit demands that films can't be screened in certain countries to support any type of social cause, even for an issue that might be at the heart of the film. And the concern raised here was less that we should be expecting some of these big distributors, like a Hulu or a Netflix or a Disney, to get into the game of social impact. I think there is a general understanding that these are entertainment-first companies. But the concern that we heard about was more the degree to which these platforms are playing the gatekeeper role, and that they're repressing content that, because it could be upsetting to authoritarian figures or to their access to emerging markets, often without any transparency or public disclosure about what's motivating these decisions. And because of this trend, one of the things that we heard as being particularly important across different countries that we engaged with is the role of regional support networks and collectives, who filmmakers say are increasingly essential to help direct funding and bring greater attention to under-resourced filmmakers and stories, especially the groups that are represented on this panel too after me. Second, several participants said that there's an urgent need for more resources and attention around wellness. So it's become common for documentary impact-related events to include a provocative discussion guide, for instance, or panels of subject experts to discuss a film after it screens. But filmmakers say that too often there's little to no resources given for hiring people who are experts in trauma or in holding spaces for those difficult conversations to happen. Producers say that too often screening events are still using the raw experiences of communities, often those communities that have been harmed and are at the focus of that documentary, as the topic of a big intellectual conversation and debate, rather than as the basis for community interrogation or healing. And this has resulted in too many events having caused more harm than good, something that is not normally captured on the typical impact report that tends to count number of people in the audience. And so to help encourage some change in this area, several filmmakers have said that it's important to lift up examples of wellness work that's being done well. And so in one of the case studies we're releasing today, well, 2 really, one about the film Pray Away, and another one about the film In My Blood It Runs from Australia. In this case study, we document a number of the strategies that they used around wellness, including how they hosted multi-day planning events with community members and the Aboriginal family that was at the heart of that film before filming even started. They also co-created an entire duty of care framework that they required all of their partners to adhere to, and which included giving the people centered in that film the power to decide which screening events to attend and how to show up. They even used a profit-sharing model, which credited all the participants as co-directors of the film and shared the profits with everybody at an equal rate to the director. And these are just a couple examples. There's a lot more in the case study, and so I'd encourage everyone to look there too, because that team was particularly generous with sharing the strategies that they used and the learnings that they had from that experience. Third, another important finding that was probably most effectively made by Tracy Sturdivant, who is a longtime organizer who leads a collective called The League, is the overdue need for everyone to more loudly acknowledge that the people who we often want to mobilize for change are typically not the ones that are going to film festivals and documentary screenings. And this means that a lot of the things, this means a lot of things, but including it means we need to start looking for new ways to use documentary content to reach new audiences, even if that means breaking some of the general rules and best practices of the field. and works that she led around the film And She Could Be Next, which is one of the case studies that we feature. Tracy helped forge partnerships with commercial companies that had nothing to do with the film's focus on political organizing, for instance, and who had never been approached by documentary filmmakers before, including a major printing company that told her that they couldn't be publicly associated with the film, but they donated several printers and other equipment to help support local organizing efforts around it. And with that support, the film team used it to amplify the activities and platforms of the women leaders at the center of that film. And then when a public television station decided to try to delay the release of the film until after a runoff election in Georgia to make the timing a little less controversial, Tracy and the team ran a big social media campaign that called out the broadcaster and tried to bring attention to, quote, the film that Georgia Public Broadcasting doesn't want people to see. And this only helped grow their tent beyond the typical public television viewer. Another point that several people raised outside specialists from cities like New York and London into local communities is not working. At least it's not leading to long-term change or movement building. And there's a larger discussion around this in the report. And then finally, filmmakers said that it's important for more people to acknowledge that impact work and co-creation takes time. And it often requires building trust with people and groups and communities that have been misrepresented by media for decades. Several producers said that too much attention is being given to celebrating big industry film festival awards, and the documentary field needs to amplify and celebrate impact campaigns that are using co-creation practices and are being led by creators from impacted communities in order to drive improved funding and support to these kind of efforts. Some filmmakers and producers we spoke to even offered to provide considerable amounts of their own money to support such an award if one was ever created, to help recognize amounts of their own money to support such an award if one was ever created, to help recognize films that are making the biggest difference. And so it is in this spirit that we've also developed 5 case studies that leverage positive examples of what's possible when docs are being used for social justice and social impact work. And this includes work that was done around the films In My Blood It Runs in Australia, And She Could Be Next and Pray Away in the US, Tema in Mexico, and Softy in Kenya. And I think on this next slide, these case studies, along with the fuller report, can be found at this QR link or by going to the CMSI webpage. And I think I'll close there, but we also have some webinars that are going to be organized around this work that I'd be happy to share with anyone who might be interested. And Katie and I also have a book coming out next year that deals with all of these themes on a bigger global scale that I'd also love to talk about. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Awesome.